Hey folks, climate change survivor here, surviving in the climate using energy and shelter. All right, so we got this 97% scientists agree climate change nonsense. Where does it come from? Okay, that's what everyone relies on. They have no idea what they're talking about. 97% agree, all scientists. How could you disagree with that, right? Well, where does that figure come from? Okay, there's been numerous studies done here. NASA references them. John Cook et al. That is the main source. Next one, Anderegg from 2010. I ran into the co-author of this study on Earth Day. You'll see later in this video. To be very clear, the John Cook paper consensus is that carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas and that human activities have warmed the planet to any unspecified extent, even a tiny bit. Basically, all the scientists agree with this. Various studies have found that less than 1% actually endorse the IPCC standard definition of consensus on climate change. In no way was this an unbiased scientific undertaking. Cook himself admitted that, quote, basically, we hope to establish that not only is there a consensus, there is a strengthening consensus, unquote. Two things are immediately apparent from his own email. Cook had decided even before he began his investigation what those investigations would reveal, and two, that this was always going to be a PR exercise, not a scientific one. What took a meaningless consensus on any type of warming caused by humans to something that we know today was President Obama's tweet. 97% of scientists agree climate change is real, man-made, and dangerous. Not only does Obama sloppily equate scientists with climate scientists, but more importantly, he added dangerous to the 97% claim, which is not there in the literature. This is called the fallacy of equivocation, using the same term 97% in two different ways to manipulate people.
Climate change is a fact.
We should not allow a tiny minority of shoddy scientists and science and extreme ideologues to compete with scientific fact.
Watch as Obama, Joe Biden, and Nancy Pelosi can't help themselves but laugh at the overwhelming joke of a consensus.
I know that there are those who disagree with the overwhelming scientific evidence on climate change. But
John Kerry pulled the same crap, telling the underdeveloped world that it should use fewer fossil fuels. Quote, and let there be no doubt in anybody's mind that the science is absolutely certain. 97% of climate scientists have confirmed that climate change is happening and that human activity is responsible. They agree that if we continue to go down the same path that we are going down today, the world as we know it will change, and it will change dramatically for the worse. They go from 97% of scientists agree that there is some involvement in human activity to full-blown we're responsible and it's dangerous and Armageddon any day now. The greatest threat in the world.
the Pentagon says that climate change poses immediate risks to our national security. We should act like it.
I also want to say, since we're talking about most scientists, I've heard 97%, 98%. There's a recent paper by John Cook and co-authors who looked at thousands of research papers which have been published in the scientific literature to see what fraction, support the scientific consensus on global warming. Well, it turns out that the 97% consensus that they found, I am indeed part of. And Senator Sessions mentioned he would agree with it too. And my associate, John Christie, he agrees with it. In fact, all skeptics that I know of that work in this business, all are part of that 97%, because the 97% includes people who think humans have some influence on climate. Well, that's a fairly innocuous statement. And that's something that continually annoys me, is those of us that are called deniers. It's never actually, I think the D word was actually used by the chairman today. It's never actually been pointed out. What is it that we deny? Also, this 97%. Well, what does the 97% consensus mean? What do all of those people agree to? Well, they agree to something fairly innocuous, and it's something that most of us agree to, that humans must have some influence on climate. The question is how much, and how much influence makes all the difference in the world if you're going to be basing policy decisions, carbon taxes, regulations, legislation, whatever, on them. It makes all the difference in the world.
Here's my encounter with a 97%er at Earth Day this year in 2017. He's also a skepticalscience.com contributor.
People are calling. So you're concerned with global warming?
Yeah, I wrote this paper,
Oh, really?
and we cited that paper, and that guy cited the two of us.
You know John Cook?
Yeah,
You met John Cook?
fine, yeah.
This is John Cook. He runs a website called skepticalscience.com. This picture and many more were found of them dressing themselves up like Nazis, taking the time to put the Skeptical Science logo onto Nazi apparel. They also dressed up prominent skeptics Anthony Watts, Lord Monckton, and James Delingpole in Spartan gear, likely in reference to them being the last of the skeptics alive. Oh, there was also this picture that depicted John Cook as Hitler. John spent a decade as a self-employed cartoonist and a web programmer, is not a climatologist or a scientist, although you'd never know based on the current About Me on skepticalscience.com. The website is misleading in every way possible, including with its name. There's nothing about it is skeptical. If you ask simple questions like, is CO2 plant food? Skeptical Science, this supposed hobby website, comes up first and answers that plants cannot live on CO2 alone, as if that was even the question. To go further, it has CO2 as plant food underneath a big red banner that says climate myth. This would be exactly like asking if humans need oxygen to live and pretending the scientific answer is that humans cannot live on oxygen alone, and have humans need oxygen under a banner entitled myth. More McDonald's isn't necessarily good either, but it doesn't mean food isn't food. Along with sunshine and water, CO2 is the important ingredient that makes plants grow. The supposed hobby website, run by a cartoonist, can't even get basic science down without misleading you. They are the kings of misinformation from internet searches. They take any claim made by a rational scientist and even proven scientific facts and stick a label myth over top. It's shameful.
You know John Cook?
Yeah,
You met John Cook?
fine, yeah.
Online? Did you ever contribute to his website?
Yeah.
Skepticalscience.com? I see.
Meet Jim Prawl. He has a master's degree in philosophy and a Bachelor of Arts, majoring in political science. He is co-author of the study he's referencing from 2010. Jim is a senior systems programmer at the University of Toronto. I find it very interesting that both Jim Prawl and John Cook have extensive experience in programming. This helps explain why skepticalscience.com appears in search engine hits long before even government sources do.
Yeah, we should really be taxing carbon, and Canada's moving in that direction. And the weird thing is, even the Congress in the U.S. is now talking about a carbon tax.
Right.
Which, go figure. How do they, they're so against it. They're so ready to ignore all the evidence. But it's getting to be overwhelming. Besides the 97%, the public is there too.
So you're saying, without a doubt, 97% of all climate scientists who've ever looked at this agree that there's going to be disaster in the future?
Absolutely.
You're saying, without a doubt, 97% of all climate scientists who've ever looked at this agree that there's going to be disaster in the future?
Absolutely.
Disaster in the future. You sure?
Yeah.
Okay. And your study from 2010 says so.
I did the research, so.
Okay. I've heard from this guy.
Yeah. 3 different methods. They did a poll. We looked at the number of scientists that are signing statements for or against, and these guys looked at.
So what about that? What is it? It's the anti-IPCC, where they had 30,000 scientists sign a petition, and that they submitted it to the U.S. government. Do you think there's 30,000 scientists like that? That's less than 3%. That's only. So you think there's that many scientists that signed up into your?
If you can go to their website, and if you look at it, take any section of the names, and very few of them are actually scientists at all. They're not dealing with climate. They
At least they give names. Try looking up names from his study.
might have some veterinarians in there. Somebody, like that.
So how many people would you say make up your 97% that you said?
Thousands.
How many people? You did the study. You should know.
I covered just about 1,300. Thousands.
How many people? You did the study. You should know.
I covered just about 1,300.
So 1,300, and they have 30,000. So how does 1,300 make up 97%?
Because these guys actually do climate science, and the 30,000 people who science were just off.
In this guy's study, it was proven for a fact that he listed people that are that are against global warming, that don't subscribe to that narrative in his study. So why are you referencing this as a proof? I want to know.
I meant to eat, but I forgot to on the way down to the march for communism, and I don't really have the patience at this point to put up with someone trying to pull my leg about 97% of scientists.
Is it because people don't look into it and you lie about this 97% like everyone? You know that 97% of scientists don't believe this garbage. You know this. You know this. This guy puts fraudulent people in his... Yeah, I'm taping. Of course I'm taping. It's public tape.
Are you with an organization?
No, I'm not. I'm independent.
Doing it for yourself?
I am, yeah.
Because I did this research myself.
Okay.
And it's a matter of honor that I wasn't faking when I did that.
So the 30,000 people, those were fake scientists.
No, it's just they're not climatologists. They're not doing any climate research.
So the people...
Take their names, search in Google Scholar.
So 97...
Let me tell you how I did my paper.
Sure. I'll look up your paper, the whole thing.
He compiled a list of researchers based on membership on multi-signatory statements, like an open letter agreeing or disagreeing with the consensus. He got 903 names for and 472 names against. He chose to line up members of the IPCC versus those in The Great Global Warming Swindle, an old movie that was aired on the BBC. The trick to getting to their 97% claim, using their carefully crafted list, was imposing a 20 climate publications minimum to be considered a climate researcher. If you were against man-made climate change, why on earth would you be writing 20 papers about it? This study is the equivalent to compiling a list of scientists that felt strongly about phrenology one way or the other and deciding if phrenology was true based on narrowing that list to only those who wrote 20 papers on phrenology. Why would someone who didn't believe in phrenology spend their time writing 20 papers about it? This wouldn't answer the question about phrenology in any scientific manner, the exact same way this paper by Anderegg and Prahl isn't helping answer any questions on man-made climate change.
Take the names of people saying that climate change is real and the people who are saying it's not. You go in Google Scholar and you say author, their name, and then the word climate. And Google Scholar will show you papers that have been through peer review. That this author said anything about climate at all. They just mentioned climate.
This
author said anything about climate at all. They just mentioned climate. How many papers did they write?
is a whole lot different than this.
You're saying, without a doubt, 97% of all climate scientists who've ever looked at this agree that there's going to be disaster in the future?
Absolutely. How many papers did they write?
I asked you if 97...
30,000, they aren't in there. Those are just people off the street. They're veterinarians, and they're conservatives. Those are just people off the street. They're conservatives.
Our next guest believes that there are forces at work that are far larger than you and I when it comes to climate change. Joining us now, the man who has the title known as the father of climatology science. His name is Dr. Reed Bryson, senior scientist at the University of Wisconsin Center for Climatic Research. Also, professor emeritus at the university.
Consensus has nothing to do with scientific truth.
Those are just people off the street. They're conservatives.
Okay.
So there's 30,000.
They're conservatives, so they don't count. You said this. Your science says scientists agree.
Yeah.
Shouldn't it say the scientists that you hand-selected agree?
There's about 2 million PhDs in science in the USA.
Okay, so 30,000 of them
are a couple of percent.
Okay, and you said 1,200 you looked at, but you get up to a 97% of scientists agree. Shouldn't you say 97% of a select few group that you handpicked? That's a fact. You just said yourself. It's out of a small group of people. It's not. It's not a performance artist.
This is a performance artist.
This is a fact. 30,000 scientists signed a petition to the U.S. government against your native. No, they're not. But the ones you...
Climate scientists.
Okay.
Most of the people he uses in his 97% don't identify as climate scientists. He includes, for example, biologists that study the effects of climate change on different animal and plants, but that doesn't mean to say that they ever studied or ever challenged the fundamental arguments that humans are causing it. Like he said, as long as they mention climate change and as long as they wrote 20 papers. When you go try to look up the names of these 1,300 scientists, it brings you to links that are dead ends and then bring you to the signatories of the letters, in which case you now have to go do your work yourself and figure out which ones did the 20 studies. It's not that many names to list. The 30,000 are listed there for you to go through. They couldn't list 1,200? Give me a break.
But yours says just scientists agree. Yours says scientists agree. I do. I want you to. And cherry picked. You think you surveyed all 100% of climate scientists? Of course you didn't. It's a laugh, isn't it? It's a joke.
You're hilarious.
I'm hilarious.
Surveyed the scientists.
I'm asking
have you surveyed
questions.
the scientists?
Don't touch
Have
me,
you
sir. Don't
surveyed the
touch me. This is on camera, okay? Don't
Have you
touch me.
surveyed the
You're getting
scientists?
off the emotional now, okay? I'm asking you. I will, definitely.
600 times now. Read their paper. Just read the
This paper has been debunked 1,000 times. 1,000 times. He put.
Give me the source.
Here's one. It says data quality is low, the data disclosure is incomplete, and that the key results cannot be reproduced or tested. Here's another. Here's another. Yet another. This one's a doozy. Inspection of a claim by Cook et al. Of 97.1% consensus shows just 0.3% endorsement of the standard definition of consensus. PhD professor of climate change Mike Hume says 97% consensus article is poorly conceived, poorly designed, and poorly executed. This Forbes article saying the alarmists caught doctoring 97% consensus didn't have to be retracted. Neither did this Wall Street Journal article. Here are journal articles in the same publication that Anderegg and Prohl were published in the first place that refute the claims by Anderegg and company. This one says, publication of this article as an objective scientific study does a true disservice to scientific discourse. All these lengths to prove something scientific when all you need is one person to provide scientific evidence that can be repeated and verified using the scientific method. A biologist writing 20 papers on the potential effects of climate change on squirrels really doesn't answer the basic question of does human-made CO2 control the climate, and if so, to which degree? Since this basic requirement of science to provide evidence to support a claim cannot be produced after 30 plus years of intense research, it goes to prove that man-made climate change has no scientific foundation. The IPCC is a division of a political body. Its aims are entirely political, and this is why the evidence cannot be produced. A million researchers could write a million papers. If one of them doesn't provide the evidence that can be tested and repeated to show human-made CO2 is the cause, then they're as good as toilet paper. Scientific consensus is meaningless.